Pete, you and I both know there's no substitute for on-the-ground experience. You've trained Afghan forces, you've trained Iraqi forces. Are there enough safeguards in place, in your view, to be protecting our troops in theater? Is there anything that you think should be done differently in order to prevent these kinds of infiltrations? Or do you think that this is just, unfortunately, a threat that our soldiers will continue to live with, be vigilant against, but there will be these kinds of incidents?
I think the latter. There's only so much you can do to defend against this, especially when you're rapidly expanding security forces. So much of what I saw in Afghanistan was a desire to build the numbers, the bottom line of how many Afghans we had on the police force and the Army. When you do that and you train less experienced troops in shorter training segments, and the vetting process, no matter how extensive it is going to miss some people in the process, and you're going to get these kinds of attacks. So it's a difficult situation that's not going to go away. Frankly, the solution, which it seems counterintuitive, is to partner even closer, is to create even a stronger bond. So that you've got that sense that they can rely on us and we can rely on them. Easier said than done in this studio than to the guys in Afghanistan who are putting their lives on the line. I think the first thing we have to do is address the deadline and change the perception that our commitment is limited. Whether it doesn't mean I want to stay forever. We can still draw down. But when you set a hard deadline, it tells our counterparts. We faced it every day in Afghanistan when I was there. I would hear the words 2014 roll off their lips. In fact, Mullah Omar in his statement used 2014. He said it's a deception that they're transitioning. 2014 is a buzzword for defeat, is effectively what he said. That's in their propaganda. It's in what our partners see in us, and that's what erodes our ability to partner with them.
Hey, Pete, it's Will. I hear you on the importance of the perception, but I want to move beyond the perception if we can, because look, when we went to bed last night, I think the story was that 3 Americans had been killed in green-on-blue attacks in Afghanistan. We woke up this morning, there was a second story that 3 more had been killed, right? But I mean, 6 in the last 24 hours. And I'm really interested in why this is occurring seemingly at a growing pace. Not just seemingly, Buck's laid out the numbers. We know it's growing over last year. Now, I also heard you say, Pete, that we're not sure how much of it is attributable to the Taliban, even though they're laying claim to it. And Buck again said in his setup, some of it could be for interpersonal conflict. Here's my question, Pete. You have been in Afghanistan. You've dealt with this. I'm curious what culture has to do with this. These are 2 different cultures, 2 different armies integrated together. And is there something there that is causing heightened interpersonal conflicts to ramp up?
No, I think there are. I mean, you're in a stressful place. Cultures that totally clash with each other, Western culture and Afghan culture. We train units more and more on sort of cultural sensibilities. Of course, you can always go too far in that. But at the same time, there are instances where blood's boiling and things are said, and honor is such a big part of Afghan society that if someone is disrespected, the only way to recoup that honor in many ways is revenge.
Have you experienced that? Have you experienced that with our allies? I mean, the Afghan troop allies, that honor being such a strong value that it's heightened your conflicts with them?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, especially if you don't have a good relationship or you're not careful with your words, what you think is a joke or what you think is a stern dressing down of correcting someone can actually be a cultural offense that they say, how do I come back to this place without getting revenge or restoring my honor, especially when you're on the front lines. I was training Afghans on a base for the most part. When you're out in the front lines and that happens, it's that much more likely that something bad could come of it. So it is a combination of those instances and also the fact that the Taliban has been infiltrating the security forces. Not widespread. All it takes is 1 or 2 to change the perception.
Right. And Pete, presumably, this is Amy, we would know more about their culture now than we did, say, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. We've been in Afghanistan a very long time at this point. My question to you is, Machiavelli said that it is better to be feared than to be loved. Does that appear to be the Taliban's philosophy, that they would rather instill fear in the populace that we're coming to get you after the American troops leave, so choose our side now, rather than to gain the populace, trust and respect?
They're trying to do both. If you look at what the Taliban statements have done over the last year, I studied these very closely in Afghanistan. They're telling their fighters not to kill civilians, to be careful, to provide services. They're providing dispute resolution in mobile courts. They're solving land disputes for the people. So they're trying to provide governance where there isn't any, especially in the countryside. But at the same time, they're turning around to members of the military, of the Afghan government, civilians who have collaborated with us and saying, either you cut it out or you're dead. And that fear is pretty effective, especially used against the 2014 deadline where folks say, well, I don't have a choice. I don't like the Taliban. I don't want them to come back, but I want to be alive, and that's the only alternative that I have. So it's a very stark choice, and they use it effectively because they know the cultural nuances that we don't necessarily know, and they play them to their advantage.
Tara,